Hey guys, and welcome back to another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. And I am your co-host, Ray Russell, riding sidecar once again on this crazy ride, as this week we continue on that voyage back to 1972 and Bob's time in the country of Iraq. And if you guys enjoyed part one, if you thought part one was crazy, you ain't heard nothing yet. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder that you guys can listen to the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop and sister shows like the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. Also, the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories. 3 projects going on right now at Regional Wrestling. It's Georgia 1981, the UWF in 1986, and Memphis in 1985. All going on right now at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to Bob's buddy, Barry Rose, and his partner, Captain Nick Massey, on the Glory Days GrappleCon cast. You get all the latest news. Everybody headed to the Glory Days GrappleCon, Orlando, Florida, April the 20th at the fabulous Rosen Center Hotel. Lots of great guest interviews on the Glory Days GrappleCon cast. And hey, how about this? It's the Pro Wrestling Academy podcast with the professor of Pro Resu himself, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Be sure to join that program as class is in session each and every week. Dan gonna school us on the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia podcast network located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And be sure to follow me on social media, guys, for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. You can friend Bob on Facebook. Find him there at facebook.com/PoorBobRoop. And you can follow me, Ray Russell, on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. And last but most definitely not least, now would be a fantabulous time to become a WrestleCopia patron. Talking about that $5 all access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia, where you get so many gifts for just $5, including my insanely detailed show notes for every episode of the Grenade, Regional Wrestling, and the Monday Warfare podcast. You'll also get early access to many of the podcasts here on WrestleCopia, where you can listen days and sometimes as much as a week earlier than the rest of the listeners. Then from there, it's remastered versions of the earliest episodes of The Grenade Show, covering the 1989 NWA project. Includes enhanced sound quality, plus new content and conversation never heard before. But that's still not all. You also get digital downloads for your viewing and reading pleasure, random bonus video drops, and of course, the Patreon exclusive Watch Along series, covering mini past WWF and WCW events. And you get all of that and so much more for just $5. No subscription, cancel anytime. Give it a try for a month. I think you'll like all of the content that I offer, and every penny of it goes right back here into supporting the brand to help keep the WrestleCopia Podcast Network and all of the great shows here up and running for the months and the years to come. And now, with the formalities behind us, the reason you're all here. Let's bring them back as we continue to tell the story of Iraq. Here he is, once again, Mr. Bob Roop.
Good to see you. See ya. Good to hear you, your voice again, Ray.
Absolutely.
Looking forward tonight. Tonight, it's sitting all week on what we talked about last time, and we've gotten to the point where things really got critical when we stopped, because what we're going to be talking about tonight is something that needs to be, you wouldn't want to tell part of it. You need to tell the whole thing.
Okay.
I'll hand it back to you. You got any particular way you want to get started?
Well, last time, we went through your arrival in Iraq and everything that went on in between there and your first match. You kind of glanced over the first match in regards to how the falls went and what, Adnan had planned and why he wanted you to quote unquote go over there, because he didn't want to have too much power. So that, at least in Saddam's eyes, if you will. And I guess now we can go back to that fateful day, the first match that you had there. I don't know if you have anything else you've had a week to marinate on it, sit on it, and think about the match or what was going on right before the match or after the match. So I guess we can pick up roughly where we left off the day of your match there with Adnan.
Okay. I never saw that crowd we talked about last week until I actually went out for the match. When I got there, we drove into the stadium through an entrance in the back. There was a gate back there. There was a big fence around the soccer stadium, about 12 feet high. Barbed wire at the top, looked like a concentration camp. There was a gate back there that we drove in and drove right almost directly under the dressing room I was going to be in. I went up there, so I didn't ever see the crowd until I walked out for the match. But I could feel them, the tension. I mean, you could hear it. You could. I mean, there wasn't a lot of screaming. There was just a lot of the anticipation of the fans. The last guy they'd seen had been Andre the Giant, was the last match, so they were just avid. They were just really, really eager. And as I said, the statue in front of the house, the mansion they built him, being all over national TV and the movie theaters. This guy was a big time star. And in between matches, you very seldom saw him because if he went out in public, he was mobbed. I mean, actually, it was dangerous. People would try to get, if he was wearing a suit or whatever, people would try to rip off a piece of the cloth just to have something they could, be like if you got something of Elvis or one of the Beatles or something, and you could show to your grandchildren, remember the Beatles? Hey, look, I got John's eyeball here. So, he had to kind of hide out. It had to be a nightmare for him. Again, I'm not feeling sorry for him, but he was a captain of his own ship there. But what got real critical was when I felt the tension building up out in the stadium, even with Rawiska had to open the door to the dressing room to come in from the other side. He was going back and forth with these demands. And the demand, we had all kinds of time. We had a week to talk about a finish for this match. Kaissie and I didn't have to get together to talk about it. Mm-hmm. All he had to do was tell Rawiska and have Rawiska tell me. Well, they didn't do that. They waited until we got to the time I was there. The match is due to start maybe 15 minutes when Rawiska came into the dressing room, and I'm again waiting for a finish. I thought maybe we were just going to wrestle, the whole hour without anybody winning it. Which that would be easy enough. You didn't really need. There was nothing special to execute. You were going to be doing a finish. You were basically going to just wrestle through. But Rawiska came with about 15 minutes before the match was supposed to start, which is kind of late. The first thing he did is he said that Adnan wanted me to cut him, and he showed me this blade. Now, I was thinking about this earlier today. The kind of blade that I was taught to make, you could have found that. I mean, that could have, say, we used it, so it got thrown up in the air, it landed in the governor's lap, right on his lap. He could pick up and look at it, and he wouldn't even know what it was, because all it would be like a little rectangle, say the size of a thumbnail, flat, just one layer of tape, with a little corner of a razor blade sticking out of it, just a little corner. It didn't look like you could cut them, even maybe get through the skin. So, and that was the way I made my blades. I didn't want to go deep. I didn't want stitches. So a lot of those guys, Abdullah and King Kurnis and guys, and don't get me wrong, that was their badge of honor, and they wanted that. They wanted to have scars. Well, I didn't. But they dug divots in their face and their forehead.
Right.
The guys had, it looked like you talk about carving. But I didn't want that. So, but anyway, Rawiska brought this blade that it was about the size of a quarter. It was circular, and it was about maybe fourth of an inch thick. I mean, it was a big, thick thing, and it had enough blade sticking out of it. Looking back through my book a while back, and I remember my comment was, well, you guys said you could butcher an ox with this thing. Because I'd never seen, I'd seen all kinds of blades, but I'd never seen one like that. And then he told me, he tried to hand it to me and say, Adnan, take this out to the ring with you. Adnan wants you to cut him. I said, well, absolutely not.
Tell him to gig himself.
Yeah, I said, I've only been in the business a short time, but I know enough to know there's no way you're going to get me to take that blade out to the ring and cut him. Mm-hmm. So Briscoe went back and forth for the next half hour. And he kept coming back with just more and more demands for me to cut Kaissie. And I kept telling him, I'm not going to do it.
This is the reason for the delay in the match then? You guys were trying to... Yes. Okay.
Yes. I'm not going to do it. So finally he came back and he said, okay, he wants you to get Juice first and then cut him. I said, absolutely. I said, I'll do the first part. Because by my contract, I was looking at... Now, again, I've only been in the business, 2.5 years. Me getting Juice would honor the contract. I came to cutting him certainly wasn't. That wasn't anything. That would be something that you would definitely want to tell somebody. Now, Rob Wisco had told me before I got there, our first conversation, he wants you to beat him. But he didn't say anything about he wants you. Oh, by the way, he wants you also to cut him open in front of 250,000 people and 500 guys around the ring with machine guns watching and 4 TV cameras and 15 still photographers. And he wants you. We're going to ask you to cut him while you're there too. I wouldn't have even gone. I wouldn't have just hung up the phone right there. So when he said, Adnan wants you to cut yourself and then, get Juice and then get Juice on him, I said, I do the first part, but I won't do the second part. But by this time, again, you could hear the crowd was starting to get more than their anticipation was turning into anger because, there was no announcements. With the PA system, you could only hear it if everybody in the whole stadium was quiet. You might be able to hear the announcement from the ringside because even if it did cover the entire stadium, that stadium, again, I said last week, it had seats for 40,000 people, the capacity. Now you've got 4 times that many, 160,000 people. And again, because one thing we left out last week was that, in a regular, any kind of contest, spectators are on the field. Well, the field in that stadium, that soccer stadium, they had a pretty extensive field because it was a soccer field, which is bigger than I don't know if it's bigger, but they also had an area around the ring that they had a track, like to run track meets. So they had a 6 or 8 lane track because it was a world-class level track. Their international track meets were held there. They wanted to have a world-class facility with, world-class standards in terms of, it was a real nice stadium. So it had quite a big infield and field. Well, the fans were also packed into that field too. Now they're standing up, and I'm telling you, they're crammed. I had to go through them, not fight my way through them, but worm my way, ease my way, elbow my way through them to get to the ring in the second match. They were packed. Back to the dressing room, and Rob Wisco come in at the last, and I refused to take the blade. I took it and looked at it, and I handed it back to him. I didn't want to carry that thing out there. I didn't think they were going to search me or anything before I went to the ring, but I just didn't want to have that thing on me because that is, what could you possibly have in mind to have that kind of thing on you? It's a weapon. What did you have in mind? Say if something happened, I passed out, I got knocked out, and they're addressing me in the ring to see what's wrong, and they find that thing? Yeah, so it was just, you talk about, you might as well carry a pistol out there. I said, why don't we, because we had done this in the past in the States, where guys that were green with the blade, to me, one of the biggest exposés was, I watched when guys got Juice in the United States. And some of the guys carried the blade on their finger. For some reason, even though you had that flesh-colored Band-Aids, I'm not sure they had flesh-colored tape yet, but you had the flesh-colored Band-Aids. But a lot of the guys would just use the white adhesive tape, and they taped the end of a finger, and they'd have the blade there. And Now, guys that were smart, they took a tape finger out there every time they went to the match. Every time they wrestled, they'd have a tape finger. Even if they were, even they were 99 times out of 100, they weren't going to be getting juiced. But they'd take it. But here comes a guy out for he hasn't had a tape finger ever. He comes out this night, and that night, all of a sudden, he's bleeding. And then you see other people doing exactly the same thing. The only time you see the tape finger, they end up bleeding. And how do they bleed? They get smacked or something, and they go down. A lot of them are going just face down on the mat, and without somebody to cover them or to do something to distract the people by even running up into a corner like Steve Austin are doing his deal, giving a finger to everybody to attract the attention of the crowd while his opponent was gigging himself. Usually they didn't cover it up at all. So what would happen was the guy'd be laying face down and he'd reach up to his head. It took sometimes 2 or 3 seconds, 1001, 1002, 1003, with him just not doing really much of anything. I mean, you can't see it because he's not moving his body. He's just moving one finger. And then he'd get up and he'd be bleeding. Well, I mean, to me, I watched it. I thought, what a blatant expose. Yeah, and there would be smart marks and that folks out there. That's not derogatory in terms. I'm not calling people marks here, but that was just a term used in the business for people who knew. They knew what was going on. They knew about the blade, and they would when the guys would go to use it, they start yelling, and the audience they'd be, hey, he's cut himself, and you hear that, and I'm going, well, why would you guys do it that way? I'm getting away from this story here. I had done a few blade jobs, but I'd never cut anybody else. So I wasn't about to do it here. So 5 minutes ago, I was talking about sometimes the promotion would have the referee carry the blade out to the ring and pass it to whoever was going to use it.
Right.
Which was easy enough to do. And so I knew that, and I made that suggestion. Why can't the referee carry it out there and then pass it to Kaissie when the time's right? And the referee backed up. I mean, he jumped up. He was standing already, but he jumped back and he's waving his hands back and forth like I just suggested him taking the blade and castrating himself. He said, whoa, we didn't forget that. He said, what, are you trying to get me fucking killed? Fucking no. And he was pissed off at me for the rest of the week. And I kept telling him, look, it was just a suggestion. But, think about it. Think about what his reaction told me. This guy, George Wade, now George was a good guy, don't get me wrong, but he'd been over there several times. So here he is showing this almost hysterical reaction to carrying the blade out there himself. How am I supposed to feel? They want me to carry it. Everybody's experience that I'm dealing with except me. And I'm the one that they're asking to do the most dangerous possible thing there is to do in this situation. And I did not know about Saddam Hussein. But, I mean, even without Saddam, anybody, I knew about the governor of Baghdad. I knew what a butthole he was. And, I mean, if he caught, oh, my God, after the crap I gave him in his office, if he'd have caught me with a blade, I had no doubt that I'd been shot right there. Now, at that time, I wouldn't have expected that. But I just knew that if I got caught, I had seen the torture chamber already. And I knew what it looked like. And I didn't want to see it again. Especially with me, checking in at the front desk.
Who winds up taking the blade out here? Because you guys do bleed, right, in this first match. Okay. So who winds up doing it? Do they finally con you into doing it, or who does it?
Well, the final order, Rob Wisco came and said, you get Juice first and then cut him. I said no.
Right.
And he came back one last time. He said, okay, you get Juice and then pass him the blade. So I tried to tell Wisco how I was going to do it, to make it idiot-proof, so that, if you drop this thing, somebody's going to die. Everybody's Iraqi. Kaissie's Iraqi, except who is the one person that really doesn't want to get caught with that? It's the American, who they hate anyway. What he said was, you get Juice and then pass him the blade. So I'm trying to tell him, George, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Why would the heel get the Juice first? They'd have never heard of that. In fact, I never did hear of that in my entire career, unless it was a hard way. I mean, accidental. Anyway, that's what we decided on what we're going to do. And we went out there. The first fall went okay. Again, the energy in the air, the anticipation. When I beat him in the first fall, he got out of the ring. He, like I say, he kicked out on about, I said last week, he kicked out on about 3.5. So it's like I just caught him, long enough to get his shoulders down for a 3 count.
Mm-hmm.
And he slid out of the ring. The referee got out of the ring and left me in the ring alone. So I'm in the corner. Even my second, the Steve Haggerty was my, and what I didn't make it clear last week, what a second is a guy who comes to the ring with you and takes your robe or your warm-up jacket and helps you warm up, and it's just like keeps you company. And he stays in your corner or nearby during the match in case you need anything, maybe a bottle of water or something, if you get a drink between falls. And all of a sudden, I start hearing these guns go off. But guns started going off from the very back of the arena. And what was going on back there was a lot of tribesmen, desert dwellers, and people who lived in the desert that had these rifles that they brought to the matches with them and carried them in. What happened? Looking out my dressing room window for the first match, I saw a bunch of people at a back gate. There was about 100 people, and they had one of these, a big gate. I'm talking about the kind that a truck can go through. It was locked. It had a chain around it. And these 100 people were pressed up against the gate, and the ones that in the back were pushing, trying to get up to the front. And the people that were in the front were being pressed so hard, some of them were getting like their faces pressed into the wire to where they were actually being opened up and lacerated. And they pushed so long that gate, the chain broke, and the gate sprang open, and all those people poured into the stadium, and nobody was taking tickets. These people all got in free. That was just before the match started. But when I think about that now, if the stadium holds, say, 45,000 for, like, say, a soccer match, how many tickets are they going to print? They're going to print 45,000, right? They're not going to print 100,000 because they can't have that many seats. So most of those people that came to the match got in free. Let's downplay it. So you only got 100,000 people. Well, 60,000 of them got in free. They had to. He wasn't going to sell 100,000 tickets because you only had 40,000 seats. So, forgot where I was.
I'm not really sure. We were in the match, and now we're kind of back.
Okay. Yeah, that's
we're
right.
in between falls.
Yeah. These Bedouin tribesmen I was talking about, they're the ones, they rode out of the desert, and they came in through the back too, and a lot of them came in with their rifles. A bunch of them had the long robes. You could have a rifle in there, nobody could see it. And a lot of them had pistols. I don't know, probably 20 or 30,000 people in the stadium were armed. And so anyway, these guns start going off. And then all these special security troops, which, whatever, they were military, but they were called a security force. And I don't know, 300 or 400, 500 of them. And what happens, they start firing their AK-47s. And within 5 seconds of the first one firing, just about all of them were firing. Well, you talk about noise, 500 guns, automatic rifles going off all at the same time. They'd empty a clip, pull the clip out, replace it, shoot it, and all of them emptied two or three clips. Well, you'd think something like that, which they had done every match. You would have thought something like that Rawisco and any of those other people would have given me a heads up on. Hey, Bob, when the first fall is over, they do this every time. They do it. It's a tradition in the Mideast. They do it for weddings and things like that too. Mm-hmm. Firing guns in the air. I mean, you see it in movies, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, all that. You see stuff like that all the time. So, but submachine guns or AK-47s and 500 people doing it at once, pretty daunting. And I'm left there, and here you coincide that with me being in the ring by myself. Casey bails out, the referee bails out. My second was under the ring. I'm standing in the ring by myself. I mean, just for just a quarter second, it scared the crap out of me, but I realized immediately, I'm not shot. So if anybody was trying to shoot me, I mean, I would be dead already because, 10,000 rounds just went off in the last 3 seconds. Certainly, if they were aiming at me, somebody would hit me. Why didn't you guys give me a little heads up? Hey, Bob, going to be a lot of gunfire after the first fall. So, don't foul your britches when you hear it, which I didn't anyway. But meanwhile, Kaissie's out talking to the governor of Baghdad all through the match. I have to set the scene. I talked about last week that these security soldiers, they made a circle around the ring. The circle went all the way around the ring. Inside the circle was the governor of Baghdad, that churl that I talked about being in his office on our last program. And he had a bunch of guests from the Mideast, from foreign countries, Egypt and Syria and Libya, that were guests there, guests of honor. And they were all sitting on luxurious couches. And the soldiers surrounded them, and they went all the way back to the entrance on that side, where the way Kaissie came out to the matches, and the governor and everybody else entered the stadium. So they didn't have to have any contact whatsoever with the fans. And the fans were kept on the other side of the security force. So Kaissie got out of the ring and ran over and started talking to the governor. And the governor was chewing him a new one. You could tell he was serious. He's talking to him like he had talked to me when I'd been in his office a couple of days earlier. So he's chewing Kaissie a new one, and Kaissie's trying to alibi, and both of them are looking up above, and I know what they were looking at. They were looking at Saddam. Saddam was somewhere in the upper part of the stadium, and he kept sending messages down to the governor because this runner would be carrying messages. I saw him come down maybe, a dozen times during a hour-long match. He came down and gave the governor some kind of note or something, and the governor would talk to Kaissie between falls, and be chewing him a new one. So that was Saddam asking for a better performance. I'm convinced. Okay, we finished the first fall. The guns went off. I won the fall. He got pinned. When I beat him, it got real quiet, and everything stopped. And then the guns went off. And then the shouting started again. We started the second fall. We went about 15 minutes. Now we're getting back to the part of the blade again. And again, this made absolutely no sense whatsoever. And now, from the position of an experienced wrestler, the only way I can think about it is that Kaissie had no clue at all about what he was doing. He was booking these matches. Not just the booker also decides what's going to happen in the match. He was choreographing. That's the wrong word because that sounds like dancers, and that's not what we were doing. But he plans what's going to happen in the match, and he's the producer and the writer and the script maker and all that. But he didn't. He had never been a booker in his wrestling career. He was a babyface, as Billy White Wolf. He was a babyface most of his career. So, and I doubt it very seldom. I doubt if I know he didn't have a lot of scars. So I don't know if he got juiced much during his whole career before he got back to Iraq. Let me move forward, and you tell me, Ray, you and our listeners, think about Kaissie's ability as far with the blade. We went the second fall started, we went, about 15, 18 minutes. They did something where it would have given me a reason to bleed. I had that big ox slayer in my hand. I held just the tip of it between my fingers, and I was on my feet when I did it and flailing around. And Kaissie was kind of coming behind me, smacking me, or not smacking me, but trying to grab a hold. And I just scratched my forehead a few times up near the hairline. It wasn't non-existent, but it wasn't. There wasn't a lot because it wasn't necessary. I knew one reaction from the fans. Anytime there's blood in a match. Blood brings out a reaction in people. It's kind of primal, back to caveman days. And so I didn't want to interject that but again, Kaissie was the one calling the shots, so I had to go along with it. I can just see me standing up there and say, well, no, I'm not going to wrestle today with, however many hundreds of thousands of people out there waiting for the match. So I took over on Kaissie. I don't remember exactly how. But I ended up throwing him in and hitting him with a high knee. And the high knee, it doesn't make contact with the face or the chin or the forehead or anything. because I turned my hip, and actually it's like the side of my hip hits him in the chest, but my knee is up in that, and the knee is up in that face area. It looks like I could have hit him. He went down, and I covered him like head to head. I had his hands down, so I had the blade in my right hand. In my left hand, and when I was pressing his hands down, I passed the blade to him with my left hand into his right hand. I wanted to pass it. You couldn't see it. We had 4 TV cameras, one in each corner. TV cameras, we could do a close-up. I told you about that one in Japan where the whole screen was filled with Nick Bockwinkel's finger. Mm-hmm. Plus, Kaissie made it with the white tape again. So it was very obvious, very plain. It was very easy to see. So, and I didn't have any of the plus color tape to put over, and I didn't have time anyway. Well, anyway, when I hit him with the high knee, I did something to cover him first and passed him the blade. Then I threw him in and hit him with the high knee. He goes down, he takes a rolling bump, and I have to admit now, he didn't do that thing where he put his face down and took 4 or 5 seconds. He did a rolling bump, and he just made it like a slash at his face. He got up, and his eyebrow, he turned around, blood just gushed out. It came spurting out, like you see in the horror movies, where the vampire bites it, and out it comes. And his eyebrow, as I went to approach him, because I wanted he was supposed to put the blade back in my tights. I didn't want him putting his hand in his own tights. I told him this during the match. I told him during the first fall, once you use the blade, I'm going to get you down. Put the blade back in my tights. So I'm trying to chase him to get him to put the blade, so he can't put the blade in my tights. He's staggering around the ring and letting everybody see it. I don't know if he had any idea. Now, he had to be blind in one eye because his eyebrow flopped down. I was looking at the inside of his eyebrow. The eyebrow itself, the hairy part of the eyebrow, wasn't visible because it had flopped down. It was now lying against his cheek, below the eye. So all there was this ghastly wound there. Oh, you talk about horrible. It was better that it was bleeding so badly you couldn't see just how horrible it was. Well, anyway, I'm trying to. My thought is I've got to get. If they find that blade, I don't know who else is dead, but I know I'm dead. So I've got to get. I've got to get that blade, and so I'm trailing along after Kaissie, and the referee is on the same trail. He's straggling around the ring. It's like he lost his mind. Now, it was good acting. It was good acting because if someone was injured that badly, they would be maybe upset and going crazy and all that. But in this case, I think that it wasn't a work. I'm pretty sure he was reacting just like he really felt like he was terrified. So I'm chasing him, trying to get him down where I could be in position for him to put the blade back in my tights. What does he do? He chops me with it. He takes his hand, he's got the blade, and he chops me. And he chops me back in the corner. Well, I didn't see it, but I heard it. The referee, George Wade, comes up and said, "Fucking hell, he dropped the blade." Oh, my God. When he chopped me, he dropped the effing blade. Can you believe it? How is that possible? How could you possibly do? I'd rather have had one of my fingers drop off than him drop the blade. Kaissie's got me in a corner. I'm about to punch him, knock him out for sure to try to find that blade. But what I did is I occupied him in a corner, and I saw it. And the referee was with us, and he's saying, "What are we gonna do?" Poor George Wade is panicking because he's gonna die too. So I don't blame him. There's one Iraqi and one Englishman and one American in the ring. 2 of them are going to die. Guess what's 2? So if that blade is found, Kaissie's going to say, and this was the deal all along. Here was my worry all along. And think about it out there listening. If you put yourself in my place, if the blade is found and Kaissie is asked about it, what is good old Adnan going to say? "Oh, I've never seen that before. Oh, the referee. Or, the American or the referee must have brought it to ring because I don't have, no, I've never." So yeah, I mean, I knew that was as soon as I saw the thing, I knew that was what was going to happen if it was exposed. He wasn't going to say, "Yeah, I'll volunteer to go along for the firing squad too." So I saw the blade over Kaissie's shoulder, laying right in the middle of the ring. I told the referee, "It's over there behind you. Go get it." And he went over to get it, and Kaissie, who I thought was berserk, I was convinced he totally lost it. I don't know if he lost it at all because the referee went over and bent down to get it. Kaissie charged after him. Well, the referee knew that Kaissie had lost it, or it was pretending to have lost it. And he reached down and made like a swipe at the blade, and then he took off. He knew that Kaissie was going to do something horrible to him, and Kaissie did. Kaissie took a big punch at him, but the referee ducked and jumped out of the ring. And what Kaissie went after him, I thought, to this day, I'm convinced Kaissie thought he grabbed the blade. So Kaissie went to go after him. He was going to like get out of the ring. Well, I looked and I saw the blade was still there in the middle of the ring. I probably just standing there, I made a world record leap, I think. It looked like Spider-Man or somebody, because I leaped from about 3/4 of the way across the ring in one bound and got my hand on that blade. Because, it's laying in the ring. If one of those cameras pick up on it, those TV cameras focuses on it, now you've got it on tape now, I mean, so I got my hand on it, and just about the time I got there, Kaissie was cat quick. He came over, he kicked me in the ribs. He kicked me in the ribs so hard that I had bootlace bruises of his bootlaces on my ribs for about a month and a half. If I hadn't rolled with the kick, he would have broken every rib on that side of my body. He kicked me so hard, and to this day, I mean, the best case scenario for him was that he was panic stricken and had just lost it. The worst case scenario is that he wanted that blade to be found. Once I found out that Saddam was part of the mix in 2015, when I found that out 9 years ago, all of a sudden all those behaviors of Kaissie in the ring and all that, all of them started to make a lot more sense. What better thing could Kaissie do than to deliver an American to Saddam, for Saddam could do whatever he wanted to with. This American came over here and had a lethal weapon and he almost blinded our champion. Yes, he's in the torture chamber. Yes, he's in prison. And, the United States might have tried to get me back, but there probably wouldn't have been much less left of me to get back because I would have suddenly probably had an accident in a torture chamber and fallen in one of the They had acid baths back there that you could put a whole body into. I might have just accidentally fallen into one of those acid baths. So, okay, the referee, I got my hands on the blade. I had it wrapped in my fist. A stonemason with a chisel and hammer wouldn't have been able to get it out of my hand. Now I knew that was my death warrant. I had my hand. So I'm backing away from Kaissie. Again, he kicked me so hard, he lifted me off the mat. He's coming after me. I mean, the one I could see was he looked absolutely berserk. And I'm screaming at him, I've got it. I've got it. Calm the fuck down. I've got it. Finally, after I backed around the ring about a time or two, he calmed down a little bit. The referee got back in the ring, and we eventually ended up getting the match started again. But before we did, and here's the part that makes me think that I talked about the berserk part was a work, because once I had the blade and it was clear that he wasn't going to be able to get it away from me, he calmed down pretty quick. That's what later had me thinking that there was something going on behind the scenes. And Kaissie got taped up. His eye had to tape his eye. And we went a third fall. And the third fall, we went 20 minutes through, but they stopped about 5 or 6 times because he kept trying. He did it on purpose. He kept trying. He'd tie up and he'd rub his face against my shoulder or something and pry that bandage off or make it loose.
So how did the rules play there? You won the first fall, but the other 2 were draws, so it just came out a draw, or did you count? Okay.
Yeah, a draw. And he went off. And when I left that day to go back to my dressing room, the security forces were lined up on both sides of the aisle for me to get out. And I just walked out free as a bird.
Okay.
There were people lining both sides. They were quiet. They were hostile. I think they couldn't believe. They were probably looking to see if a Superman cape under my wrestling singlet because he beat Andre the Giant 2 straight. I come in there, not only doesn't beat me, but I actually beat him 1 fall.
Right.
So I got out of there. I got back to we got into the van. We got out of the van, got back on the road out of there before people even started leaving the stadium in any great number. And even if they did, there was a big main road that was like 3 lanes wide. It was made out of big cobblestones. But you didn't. If you had a vehicle, you didn't have to be on that because the people walked on that rather than be out on the sand. They would walk down that road to walk back that. And 150,000 people walking a 3-mile road back to Baghdad. The road was full for hours.
Sure.
Well, anyway, we got back to Baghdad. I got back to my hotel. I said last week you talked about the ring. I said it was a boxing ring and that I didn't get an injury from the ring.
Right.
Well, in actuality, I did. Casey and I did a lot of amateur wrestling throws called saltos and suplexes. They're not slams. You actually have your guy wrapped up around the waist. If you're behind him, you take him over backwards. And if you're in front of him, you can overhook his arms, or you can be under his arms and you throw him in that position. And we both did that, I don't know, maybe a dozen times each over a period of an hour.
Right.
And that landing on that hard ring with the guy on top of you, that would bruise you. Again, I was young and I wasn't yet 30, but I was in a hot bath. I think I had a rum and coke. We were supposed to leave the next day in the morning. And Raul Wisco came in, so we had a connecting door to my room. And he came in, and I said, "Well, what time's the plane leaving tomorrow, George?" I said, "Man, I'll be so glad to get out of here." He said, "Well, Bob, there's been a development." And I said, "Yeah, what is that?" He said, "The governor wants another match." And I said, "Well, tell the governor to go F himself. He can't have one." He said, "Well, Bob, I'm afraid you don't understand what the governor wants, the governor gets." I said, "Well, he can't force me to have another match." Wisco said, "Well, you won't be able to get a plane out of here, Bob, until you do what he wants. You won't be able to leave." I said, "Well, I'll wait." And I thought about that for a while. What, am I going to wait 6 months? And they
have your passport too on top of that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they had me. They had me completely. So I refused for several days, and they stepped up the pressure on me. They changed my security guards. I got 2 new guys, and their deal was they were going to try to keep me in the hotel, not be able to leave the hotel for any reason until I changed my mind about having another match. And I said, "Well, you know what? Maybe I'll consider having another match. But if I can't even train or whatever, I want to go out and run. I can't work out in a hotel, do the kind of exercise I need to be able to go out and wrestle." So I forced them kind of to be able to, they couldn't keep me in a hotel. Now, the first day I stayed in my room, and these guys walked up and down outside the hallway outside my room all day. These 2 security guys. One of them I nicknamed, he was a big, fairly heavy guy named him Fatso. I didn't say it to his face, but so I thought of him. He was a vile character. And they would walk back and forth in front of my room. They'd stop at my room and in front of the door. And, I could see their feet under the opening at the bottom of the door. And they stand out there for a minute or 2, and then they keep walking back and forth. And they would switch about every hour. It was just kind of a way of letting me know they were there, and I was being watched fairly closely. They said, "Well, if we think that you're going to be hard to find. You remember those jail cells we showed you in the governor's office? Those ones down there, that great big cell, and maybe your hotel will be in that place." So, but anyway, I resisted for 3 or 4 days, and then on the 4th day, the rematch was. There was a holiday 8 days away. They already started advertising it, even though I told them, "No, I'm not going to do it." I went to a movie one night, just demanded to get out of there. these guys are sitting right behind me. Well, in the movie, they were already advertising the second match. I told Rod Wisco, I said, George, I'm not going to do it. I said, I almost got killed out there that first time. I mean, I was still, that exponential terror that you feel with that blade flowing around. That's why I talked about it so long. Because, I mean, that was the most terrifying moment of my life. And I had situations where I had a crowd with people with one of them had a gun in my back. That wasn't, that was pretty terrifying too. But nothing like that, that blade, because, oh my God, 100 or 250 pounds, not just witnesses, the TV cameras there. Anyway,
yeah, and there's a little more to it as well. I mean, like if it was just a missed punch, a light punch, I mean, nobody's going back and you've seen it. Once it happens, it's happened versus a blade laying on the mat is still laying on the mat.
Exactly.
People can start to observe it. Yeah, I get you.
Well, it's evidence. I mean, it's got blood on it, his blood. He had a gusher. Yeah. So it's got his blood on it. I mean, the white tape, half of it's red. So, yeah, they find that, and I'm toast.
So you're 4 days into this 8-day waiting period here. At this point, you say you're not going to do this. And right. At no point you didn't think they would just come right up there and grab you and just put a gun right to your head? I'm surprised they didn't do that knowing where you're at this point. That's crazy that, they were this, I hate to use the word calm with you, but it sounds like they were, I don't think what they were doing is appropriate, but it seems like compared to what I would have expected them to try to, just to scare you right into it. And then you kind of say, hey man, I need to get out of here. You kind of, use some psychology with them to get out of your room. What day are we at when what happens to, we finally go ahead with this match?
Well, I got a call that, the concierge in the hotel and I struck it off. We became kind of, at least, he was a good guy, and okay. I talked to him, and he called me and said that a local photographer photography studio had put together a scrapbook of pictures that they'd taken during the match, and that they wanted to make a gift of it to me, but they wondered if I would come by the studio they had so they could get some publicity shots while they were giving it to me. And I agreed to do that. That seemed like, one thing, it got me out of the hotel. And the other thing, it seemed like, it seemed like a nice thing to do if they were going to, if they gone to the effort to make something like that for me. It all ties in. Let me go on. So we went to the photography place, nice scrapbook. And as we're leaving, there's a big crowd. Now, here's what happened in Baghdad. Anytime I went out in public, go back to the first day when I went and I took some videos of that big statue or not statue, but the big one-dimensional poster, that telephone tall poster of Kaissie and me in one of those roundabouts in Baghdad. By the time we were there for 2 minutes, there was 10,000 people out there with us. They just came from everywhere because there was nothing going on in Iraq. There was no excitement. There wasn't, the television was mostly a mosque and religious music and, religious figures quoting the Quran and all that, which is fine, but it's not really that entertaining in terms of recreational type entertainment. So having anything different, another little aside here, I went to the movie, might have been before the first match, went to the movie, and they showed advertisement for the upcoming match on the screen in front of us. And I've got a picture of me and Kaissie, and I think they had a big picture of my Florida belt was made it out to be like some kind of big prestigious belt. But during the movie, I'm sitting up in the mezzanine. I'm sitting up there on the second floor, but I'm sitting right at the rail. And so when they showed that me and Kaissie, I looked down and not everybody, but about 9 out of every 10 people, instead of looking at the screen, they're looking at me. Well, the movie started, and I looked down, from time to time, I'm trying to watch the screen. I looked down. About half these people, instead of looking at the movie, they looked at me for most of the movie. I looked down there, and these people are sitting there staring at me. I guess it would be like, again, I wasn't important, don't get me wrong, but they had a level of celebrity. It'd be like, I guess, if you went to a movie and Elvis was sitting up there, or, nowadays maybe Beyonce or somebody like that. But even now, you and I wouldn't sit there and stare at her the whole movie, I don't think. I wouldn't anyway, but so
it's a very different time, though. There's definitely nothing
was,
going on there back in the early 1970s. So it's just a different level of everything. Yeah.
So anyway, we're leaving the photography studio, and the two security goons I'm with, they grabbed this kid that I'd seen him on the way in, and I said something to him or whatever. And on the way out, they snatched this kid and smack him around a little bit, put handcuffs on him, and now they had done this a number of times. Every time I went out, like that time at I talked about going in to take the roundabouts. The first day, they had parked the car at the end of a blind alley. It was a roundabout there, like 6 lanes. City of 3 million people at the time. You couldn't park on the roundabout, like up on the grass. They parked across the 6 lanes in an alley they found over there, and we walked across the 6 lanes of traffic, which just stopped. They saw us, they just stopped. In fact, they stayed stopped. Most of them got out of their cars and came with us. That's where the 10,000 people came from in 5 minutes. So when we went to leave, these people followed us back down that alley. So now I'm in the vehicle in the back seat, it's a Mercedes-Benz of some kind, some make, and their 2 goons are sitting in the front, and we're backing up. You got to back through these people, and most of them are friendly. They're smacking, not smacking, but they're slapping, not hard enough to break it, but they're slapping the window next to me, and they're going, and they're making signs like, oh, Casey's gonna. He had a finish hold that was like Dusty Rose's elbow to the back of the neck, and they're making that sign on their own, the elbow under their own fist on the other hand, like he's going to beat me and all that. But they're smiling, and nobody's being nasty. Nobody's, I didn't go by.
They weren't hostile. They were just they were backing their own guy. I got it.
Yeah, that's it. All of a sudden, they stop the car, and Fatso jumps out, and he grabs this guy. And he the guy had a jacket on, like a sport coat. He pulls his sport coat down and smacks him a couple of times, pulls his sport coat down, and bends the guy over the front of the car and starts rifling his pockets like he's looking for something. I later asked him, what were you looking for? He said, well, I thought he had a gun. And no, he didn't. So when he did that, all of a sudden all the good camaraderie and the cheer and the friendly elbow and the fist, and people smile at me. Yeah, you're American. Because I hadn't wrestled yet. So they wanted to see me wrestle. So nobody wanted to kill me yet. So, they say, yeah, our guy's going to beat you and all that. Well, the crowd immediately went dead quiet. And I felt the heat. I felt the tension build. Being a heel, I understood what he was. And I saw, we still had an alley. We had about 30 yards of alley that was full of people that we still had to get through. And Fatso's bending this guy over and making a horrible heel out of me. Oh, I jumped out of the car as quick as I could. And I didn't worry about it being safe for me to do it. I jumped out of there. I went over and I pulled Fatso off the guy. Oh, I made an enemy of him forever. And I elbowed him away. I said, get back in the car. And you're not supposed to talk to those guys this way. And I picked the guy up that was bent over the hood. I pulled his jacket back up around his shoulders, back where it had been. I smoothed his coat a little bit. I patted him. I gave him a little short hug. I said, I'm so sorry. In case of, over-eager protection here, I'm very sorry. They did that. And immediately the heat went out of the crowd. Oh, but when I got back in the car, those guys hated my guts. I made them, you weren't supposed to do that. They were supposed to be the authority. None of those people would have done anything to them. Because if they did, not just them, their family, but their neighbors, maybe everybody in their whole block was going to be in the torture chamber an hour or two later. because that's the way they did things over there. So you did not, like I told you last week, say something bad about the president, they cut your tongue out right on the spot. So, that's a fascist society. That you can do anything you want to people. You can take them, do whatever you want. Nobody's going to fight you because the government's got all the power. They got most. Saddam was making sure of that. All those people I talked about him having taken out in the hallway and shot by the people who denounced him, those were all people that would possibly maybe form an opposition to him. He got rid of all those people, and he kept them out of government as long as in fact, he was able to do it for, 30 more years before it finally caught up to him. So, yeah, those guys had carte blanche. They could do whatever they want.
What did they wind up doing to finally convince you, if you want to use that word, though, to get you to agree to this second match? Well, with the way they're already going on with this kind of nonsense.
Well, they took this kid, they put him in the car. They had a radio, a handheld in the car, and they called in, and whatever they said, and here's what they said. They told the office or the forces to be to go out, and they took the kid's wallet, and they looked at his identification card, and they called, and they were looking at the card when they called. So what they were doing is they were telling their buddies back into base to go and find this kid's family and to bring them to the place where we were getting ready to go to, because the kid reacted. He screamed, and he was handcuffed with hands behind him. He was sitting between them in the front seat. He started fighting back and forth, banging his head and just fighting. He's screaming, "No, no." Fatso jumped out of the car. His cohort grabbed the kid and pulled him out on his side. Fatso took a big club from under the front seat, not as big as a baseball bat, but about half that size. And he went around, he smacked the kid 3 times, knocked him out with the third one. And they opened the trunk and threw him in the trunk. Now, there's about 1,000 people that had come to when they saw me go in the photography studio, they came and waited outside for him to come back out. Mm-hmm. Well, they followed us down to where the car was parked. So all these people are watching, and they're not looking at these goons. They're not looking at Fatso and his slimy colleague. They're looking at me. I'm the one that caused this poor kid to be treated like this. I mean, that's the way they saw it, because if I hadn't been there, it wouldn't have happened to him. So the heat went on me. And that's what they tried to do every time I went out. There was an incident like this, because they were trying to make the people hate me. I told you about the fans being halfway genial. They weren't, "Oh, we hate you, we want to kill you." I was there as a competitor, and athletics does transcend politics. They were going to have a match. I was a character in a play they were going to see, or a match. So they, while they were saying, "Yeah, our guy's going to beat you," they were kind of welcoming me, because without me, there couldn't be a match. But the government didn't want that. They wanted those people hating me, because one of their plans of getting rid of me was called murder by mob. And we'll get into that hopefully later. For those of you out there, I apologize for going on at length, but this was a time in my life that took me years to get over. So anyway, we end up going to a place they're going to drop this kid off. They take him up to a nondescript building. Didn't have a clue what was going inside. Well, what was going on inside was a torture chamber. And so they were going to take this kid in, and Fatso came around, opened the door, and said, "We can't leave you out here unguarded. We both need to take him in, so you need to come inside." Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to go. I had an idea that whatever was in there, where are they taking this kid? It's got to be a jail or something. I don't want to go in there. So I halfway refused to go. Fatso had his partner was taking the kid up to carrying the kid up to the door, and he called out, and 2 more guys came out. These guys didn't wear uniforms. They wore suits. They were like Secret Service protectors. They're like our president. And so I had 3 guys out there, coats open, hands on guns, basically as you're going to come inside, or we're going to make you come inside, or whatever. And always saying, not threatening me, but always saying, No, for your own protection, for your protection. Now, there was nobody out there. I mean, whatever the threat was, I don't know what they were talking about. So I had to go inside. And when I went in, the part we went into had a couple jail cells and a door down at the end of the hallway about, 10 feet past the last. There were two cells.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they put me in one, and they took the kid in the back. For my protection, they locked the door, of course, to make sure that nobody could get in my cell and hurt me, but also so I couldn't get out. And I don't know, maybe 10 minutes later, the kid they took in the back. About 10 minutes later, they bring in this man and a woman, his wife, and their daughter. And it turned out this was the family of the kid they grabbed. And they put them in the cell next to me. So they were I didn't know who they were. I didn't have a clue, but I thought what tipped it off was, because I didn't know exactly I didn't know how nasty, how really just terribly evil people were. Well, after they'd been there a minute or two, or a few minutes, we heard some screaming, and they went to pieces. They just, the lady and the little girl. The girl was about 10 years old. They both started crying, just almost hysterically, and the dad just looked like he was about to come unglued because it was their kid that was screaming. That went on for a while, and then eventually they brought the kid out. What they had done is that they brought him out and they carried him out, threw him in the cell. He was unconscious. What I think when Fatso smacked him back at the beginning, when they were still getting in the car to go to the torture chamber, I think that when Fatso smacked him, I think he fractured his skull because the kid never did really come out of a kind of a half coma-like situation. Well, they brought him out and they threw him in the cell with his family. And what they had done to get the scream, they dislocated his thumb. He brought him out. His thumb was pointing in the wrong direction. They left us out there alone. And from my medical practice or training in the service, I knew how to fix his thumb, at least make it where it wasn't hurting so bad. And I had to get the dad to trust me long enough to let me. I had to reach through the bars to do it, but I reduced that dislocation, and the kid was out of it. He wasn't screaming anymore. I know it made his parents feel better. It made me feel better. Well, I don't know. Every minute seemed like an eternity, but before too long, they bring another family out, and a man, a woman, a son, and a daughter. And all four of them have been, I'm not going to go into detail, but all four of them have been violated to just about as bad as you can violate people. And they put them in a cell with me. Fatso came and he came out and he was actually wearing like a butcher's apron so he didn't get blood on his pants and suit. He'd taken his coat off, but he had like a butcher in a butcher shop where he didn't get blood on his clothes. And he came out and he was wiping his hands and he looked at the people in the cell that they just brought in there, and he was nodding his head like, "Oh, look what a good job I did." It's like he had been a big part of the horrible abuse they'd done to these people. And then he walked down and he started looking at the new family, the kid that they just brought in. He made it real clear that if I didn't do something, these people were next to be tortured. So I realized that if I was going to be able to live with myself or maybe just stay alive, at that time I had no clue how far they were going to go. But I just knew I was in territory there's no way you could ever be prepared for that kind of crap.
It seems like you were really a prop in a way because they needed you to do that job, so to speak, to Adnan for all the people that saw the first match that went back. That's a lot of people. It's 6 figures. Otherwise, they would have just finished you off rather than torturing other people in front of you. They needed you to go back out there so they could visually tell their story on camera. Right. So that's basically why they haven't touched you at this point.
Well, I said last week, it was political. The wrestling matches were a big political rally. Yeah. All those people there, when Saddam or whoever, whenever anybody was talking about the match. Now, Saddam didn't come to the match because by that time I don't know if he would come if it had been an Englishman there. Because by this time he had murdered so many people, maybe you'd be sitting there with your back to sitting on one of those.
A whole lot of people.
Well, that back to your crowd, and someone who doesn't care the fact he's going to get blown to bits comes up and shoots you in the back because you murdered his family last weekend when they were in the torture chamber. So he didn't go to the matches. I'm not sure it was because of me. I think that was part of it. He didn't want to be anywhere near me. I didn't see him or the president. Gordenko and Andre, the two guys before me, both saw president and vice president multiple times, not just once or twice.
Right.
Multiple times. They were there, both there.
This was day what? Roughly, I mean, you say it was 8 days out when this first started. The first 4 days, you were adamantly no. What day would this roughly have been when you finally agreed to the match that they were already promoting? This was
day 4.
Okay.
So I'd been in the country 10 or 11 days.
Okay.
So the match was still several days off. What they needed, you hit it earlier a second ago. What happened when Kaissie didn't beat me? Kaissie was looking for his own skin. I don't know if he had the sophistication, and I don't to understand what he had done. By not winning, he made the party. He represented the party, that vast political party that Saddam was vice president of. And by not winning, he made the party weaker because they weren't the steamroller that just took Andre and beat him 2 straight.
Now the political party needs their heat back, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
They need their clout. They're omnipotent. All of a sudden they're not looking all powerful anymore.
So this is where you agree to it, I'm assuming, during this whole okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens for the duration of the rest of those 3 or 4 days in between? Do you just get put back in your hotel room and sit there, or do they let you train, or do they let you out? I mean, what goes on during those days?
Well, once I was committed, they let me train. They got what they wanted from me. They knew I think they knew what was going to, I don't know if they knew what was going to happen or not. Well, there was one good thing that came out of me agreeing to wrestle again. In a process, he did it to himself, but Fatso ran into a bullet himself. Now, I didn't fire it, but I have to say I had something to do with it. Part of my agreement to wrestle again was that Fatso I had insulted him enough and pissed him off enough that he had made it clear that he was going to get me one way or another. He was trying to charge me as one of the guys that he tortured that we heard screaming. He got the guy to admit, and they had the guy's foot in an acid bath. They got him to admit that I was a spy for Israel. The guy was a Jewish, some poor Iraqi Jew that they had trumped up, and so because one of the guys in the cell next to me had been back there when they were torturing the guy, and he told me what they were talking about. Fatso was trying to get this guy to admit that I was a spy for Israel, so that after the match they could do whatever they wanted with me. When I got ready to agree to wrestle again, I let the powers that be know that I was real reluctant to wrestle as long as I had to worry about this guy Fatso. He hated me so much that how was I supposed to know that he wasn't going to just do what he wanted to me after I went out there and did whatever I did. So they ended up bumping him off. I know it sounds preposterous. It sounds fantastical. I mean, believe me, my mind works. I hate the fact that I even have to. I shut all that stuff out for years. The way to get rid of PTSD is to go back and relive it and try to see your way out of it in a new life. But yeah, and then we had a second match. In that match, Kaissie was supposed to beat me, but I
would hope so.
Yeah. Oh, I wouldn't have.
Is this again the old 2 out of 3 fall gimmick again? 20-minute rounds.
Yeah, one of the faults was he was going to hit me with the elbow. I'd go down, he'd cover me, because if you went down, the guy had to cover you either right away, or a lot of times you threw him, like a lateral drop or whatever, and you went down with him and covered him, and you could keep your shoulders down for 3 count. You couldn't knock a guy down with like a back elbow or something.
Strike. Okay.
yeah, a strike of some kind, and then cover him. You had to kind of stay in touch with him. He was supposed to have me by the hair and hit me with an elbow in the back of the neck. And when I went down, as I turned to go on my back, he would kind of come down with me and cover me and get a 3 count.
Okay.
And that was in the first fall after like, I don't know, 8 or 9 minutes.
Let me ask you, Bob, was this, I'm hoping that this time around you guys were going to go 2 and out, like 2 straight falls for Adnan, because I can't see them risking you going over again and what some of the repercussions might have been with people that weren't going to wait to see what happened.
Yeah, it was supposed to be, he was going to win 2 falls. Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't care. I didn't care if he pinned me 2 falls.
No, just as long as you get the hell out of there, but, I'm sure.
But, you know, there's I'll explain why the but right now. Well, instead of covering me, he hit me pretty hard. I saw the stars and all the red colors in my head and all that. And when I wasn't completely out, but I could hear things are kind of in a fog.
And loopy, a little bit loopy.
Loopy. Instead of him covering me, the referee starts counting like a boxer being down for. And okay. I left that out the other day. I actually said it wrong. There was a boxing count. I did mention that part.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, you count to 10. But if you do that, the match is over.
Okay.
That's it. If it happened in the first 30 seconds of a 60-minute match, you knock the guy down somehow, he tripped and banged his head or whatever, and he can't get up, well, the match is over. I guess making a guy give up might be worse, but that's the worst way you can get beat. You lose all credibility.
Right.
Now, I went into it having beaten Kaissie, or at least not gotten beaten by him. I was Godzilla in their people's mind. Well, the second time I got up from the elbow, or the first time I got up from the elbow, he gave it to me again. And that time, I got up on the first one at about 3. That time, I went out for, I don't know how long, but when I woke up, it was like at a 6 count. And I managed to get up for that one. Well, he hit me again. And he didn't go down again and cover me again. And the time I woke up after that one, the ring's full of people. The match is over.
Wow.
I got counted out, 10 count. Kaissie's running around like a maniac. There's people in the ring these military guys filled up the ring. There's probably a half dozen guys in the ring. And one of them's got the belt and trying to hand it to Kaissie. And Kaissie's running around screaming at him, get the F away from me, and just acting like an absolute maniac. The referee came over and tried to do something. Kaissie and threw him out in the top rope. He threw him completely over the top of a TV camera. If the guy hadn't landed on a bunch of people, poor George Wade would have been crippled because he came down head first. He lost it. Believe me, under those circumstances, it was the same kind of crowd. It was packed, and that hysteria, that mob hysteria was there. So yeah, I don't blame him for feeling that way. But I'm sitting in a corner now, just coming back from having been knocked out, and things are surreal. I'm like, where am I? And I'm not that, but like, okay, what's going on here? What happened while I was out? At one time during I backed into a corner. I was sitting on the mat, and I backed into a corner and pulled my legs in, and just put my back against the turnbuckle. There's a big TV camera and a big TV camera stand right there in the corner, so my back was kind of protected because the fans were up around the ring. But I put my back there, and during that time I was there, this one guy had a different unit. The military people had different kind of uniforms, different colors, different styles. Two of the guys were walking around with guns in their hand. One of them came up to me. He still had his gun in his hand. He looks at me and he looks over. He looks at the governor. He's looking at him. The governor, I look over. I see him looking to where he's looking. He looks at the governor, and I looked at the governor, and the governor just kind of ignored him. But I wondered what he was looking at the governor for. Was he asking for permission to shoot me? Later on, this guy and another guy with a different uniform, who turned out to be an Army guy, they both had their pistols out, and they got into bumped into each other or something. What they were doing, they were still on television, of course. This was going all over the Mideast. All these military guys were generals, top-ranked people. They were all jockeying for position. They wanted to be part of a big, important thing. I mean, this was like a Super Bowl on steroids over there in Iraq. I mean, just they didn't have anything like it. It would be like a Muhammad Ali fight, I think. Yeah, these guys were looking to juxtapose their position in the pecking order and to try to look superior to someone else. That's why they were all in there. They were trying to get Kaissie. This one guy was trying to get Kaissie to accept the title belt from him, and Kaissie didn't want to have me, but Kaissie had lost his mind. One of the reasons I've told this story, what you've heard for the last hour and a half, I'm going to segue just a little bit here. Bear with me. One of the reasons when I was writing this book, one of the reasons that I felt such a pressure and put a deadline on myself was that I wanted to get it finished before Adnan Al-Kaissie passed away. The reason I wrote it in the first place was because he had, in his book, and I heard it on an interview, he had badmouthed Gordienko and Andre both as being guys who fell apart in the ring when the guns went off. He talked about George Gordienko falling down on the mat and crying and all that, which is absolutely not the truth. That's what I said last week. The reason George went down on the mat was because the guys with machine guns, they were firing them up in the air. Obviously, if they were shooting at him, he would be dead. But they were firing their guns up in the air, but there was so much smoke, he was worried that someone might fire a little different angle where they might hit him by accident. Nobody tried to shoot him. That's why he dropped down below the smoke so they could see him. It wasn't because he was afraid of anything. No, but he's a little nervous about the situation. If he wasn't, he'd have been crazy. But of course, George Gordienko, he tied up with a bear that still had his claws. That guy was hard to scare. Yeah, but when Kaissie made that comment about Andre was crying and Adnan Al-Kaissie had saved the day and backed those guys up and everything. And when I heard that, I was so pissed off about it. You know, here you're knocking two guys that are dead. They're both gone, and you're knocking their reputations. And I know that wasn't the case. The way I found out about George and what happened was I told you about being friends with his nephew, Ted Gordienko. And Ted's the one that filled me in about all this stuff, about how George was treated over there. Ted got involved in pro wrestling as a way of paying tribute to his uncle. So he was able to share all kinds of stories with me about what was going on over there. That's why I knew about what had happened to George, because George had passed away by the time I wrote the book. And I never got a chance to meet him, which is one I really regretted. But anyway, Kaissie beat me that way. It made it extremely dangerous for me, and here's why.
So do you think I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Bob, but before we get to the next part of the story, I just want to clarify something with you. You probably don't even really have an answer. I'm just curious your thoughts. Do you think he went in there planning on doing what he did, knocking you out, taking advantage of you because you're giving yourself to him? Or do you think he, like you said, kind of lost it and just everything going on and he just got, the adrenaline type thing? You talked about Dr. Death grabbing you and kind of whipping you around when he broke in. Do you think it was just Adnan a little bit lost it? And like you said, maybe just the crowd and everything going on and what had happened in the first match and everything in between. And he just kind of accidentally knocked you silly? Or do you think that was his plan, to just go in there and do it this way?
Well, let me ask you this, and anyone listening out there. Adnan had been under a lot of heat for the 6 or 7, 8 days between the first match and the second match because he didn't beat me. What would be the best way for Adnan to get all his clout back?
Well, that's what I was thinking, but I was just wondering, like, you just want to get the hell out of there. So what was stopping him from just booking this to begin with? I'm going to come in there and I'm going to drop some elbows on you and you're going to stay down. I don't understand.
No, I never would agree to that.
Really? I would have agreed to pretty much anything at that point to get the hell out of there.
No, I got to get away from those 100 and 200,000 people.
Oh, okay. I got you.
There's not enough security forces to hold back 200,000 people who are trying to kill you. Kaissie did the worst possible thing for me. He took a guy that they thought was Superman and turned him into Lex Luthor. He turned me into he went from, this guy who was an Olympian, the American who came in there and beat him or didn't get beat, which was just the same. You know, it was like he beat Andre, he beat everybody.
Right.
But he couldn't beat me. And then not only does boy now he's really sucked it up, and plus I busted him open. He got all the stitches. He had 22 stitches, I think. Now he's going to come back and get revenge. I don't know what kind of abuse he was making in his language, what he was saying, what was going around. But by beating me that way, see, he would have never gotten me to. I would have said, look, you can beat me 2 straight, but both falls are going to be at least 15 minutes, and you're going to catch me. I'll agree to do the elbow. You know, that'd be fine. But I'm going to kick out on 3.5 and then get up and continue. And second fall, I would have tried to get a DQ. By beating me the way he did, he took away all my credibility. And all that anger and angst and everything they had felt because he didn't beat me the first time, all that immediately transposed towards me. Adnan was gone. He wasn't there for the sign autographs, for them to put him on a, take a parade down the street on the back of a car, sitting up there, everybody throwing roses at him. He went back, and he was back having drinks and cocktails and having dinner while I was still in the ring. And it took me an hour.
I would say you talked about going from looking like Superman to basically Superman with kryptonite. I guess really you looked like a weak in there, but you were also vulnerable. They saw you go down. They realized you had been somewhat knocked out for a few seconds anyway. So even if they had feared you just a little at that point, they still see that you're vulnerable, and this is the time to attack.
Their respect turned to scorn.
Okay.
It turned to scorn and disrespect. And now it's fair game. They've been pissed off at me for a week because of what happened. I mean, but they thought I was Godzilla.
Right.
Now I'm not Godzilla. I'm not Superman. I'm Lois Lane or Jimmy Olsen
sure.
In a wheelchair or something. And so, I was, and it was fair game. And the other thing is that the security for the first match was AK-47 security soldiers. The security for the second match was Army people with batons. No AK-47s.
Wow,
batons.
That's kind of peculiar.
Oh, yeah.
It's weird change.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Kind of interesting, too. Because when the match was over, now the governor there were some security soldiers out there. And what they did, we talked about trying to keep the crowd back away from the ring. And I said last week it never worked. Well, the same thing in this case. When this match started, as soon as it started, the second match, about half the guys, the military guys, the Army guys with batons, they weren't specially trained, brutal, ex-mercenary type security soldiers. They were a bunch of local conscripts. And when the match started, half of them turned around and wanted to watch. Well, their job was to keep the crowd back.
Right, yeah.
As soon as they turned around, 4 or 5 people made a dash. They wanted to get up right by ringside. So they made a dash for ringside, and 2 or 3 guys of the security team went to go after them. Well, it opened up a big gap. Everybody went to ringside. So what the governor did, and Kaissie and I tied up, and within 20 seconds, nobody was watching us anymore because there was a melee going. There were sticks. They were using the batons. They knew how to use those. And the people that were coming, I saw some poor lady get smacked with a baton right across the face. She was just standing there minding her own business. Now, the governor had, again, from the way he came in, from the outside of the ring, the way that he and his party entered, and around him, all the way up to the edge of the ring on both sides, were security guys, the guys with the AK-47s. They were there. There was like 100 of them or whatever. So nobody, those guys had bayonets on their, or some of them at least had bayonets on their rifles. So nobody was going to try to get in there. Well, they shoot you. They didn't care. They shoot you if you try to get in. So the governor and Kaissie were able to get out of there, no problem. But as soon as they did, all the security guys took off and left me out there with, what was left of the crowd and these bozos with the sticks. And it took me an hour to get out of there. And there was something else going on, too. They were taping what was going on. one of those cameras was still on. Security guys around the ring, not security, these Army guys around the ring, and they were just barely keeping people out of the ring, without going into detail, because that's, again, it'd take too long. It wasn't until they had to send security guys down there to get me out of there, because they didn't want me finished right there, apparently, or it didn't look like it was going to happen. I took a sword away from a guy that tried to crawl in the ring with it, and I took a pistol away from one of the security guys. They became apparent that they had to change their plans. They had a different way set up to deal with me.
I don't understand why they want to deal with you. You did the job. You went down like a sack of potatoes. Why not just let you get the hell out of there like every other wrestler that came through there? I don't understand.
Well, imagine if Saddam had a tape of an American.
Mm-hmm.
I told you last week about how much heat the United States had in the Middle East after the war of 6-Day War.
Yeah.
Where they got their ass handed to them in 6 days. They had such hatred. And also there's another factor. When you have regimes that are dictatorships, or like Saddam's, and like a lot of Egypt had a king Farouk, I believe. No, wait a minute. Egypt had Nasser. King Farouk was before him. So, but in these countries where you had, I called it government by gunpoint, these guys were always paranoid, and I don't blame them. The way they came to power is by overthrowing an earlier party.
Right. You told the story of the museum with the cars, so that's obvious. Yeah.
Right. So they're always looking over their shoulder to see the same thing happen. What would give Saddam more prestige than to be able to take a private tape that he had made of an American being torn to pieces by a mob, and to take it around to Egypt and Syria and Lebanon?
But was Iraq ready in the early 70s to? I mean, you're an American. Had this gotten when this got back to the United States, certainly there would have been some repercussions coming back towards them.
Well, when Saddam hung the 15 Israeli Jewish citizens.
Yeah, in the square.
The UN Security Council brought on, I think the Secretary of State was Schultz at the time, for Nixon. They condemned Saddam for doing that. And it pissed Saddam off so bad, because United Nations, of all the countries of the world,
mm-hmm.
are condemning him for an action he did in his country. So he hated Nixon. He hated the United States.
Right.
He was getting all his stuff from Russia. All the arms and everything. All those AK-47s, they didn't make those in Iraq. They bought them. They bought that stuff. And the United States was supplying Israel with all their armaments, planes, and the governor was right. We were supplying them with planes and bombs and all that. Now, they were paying, I don't know if they were paying for all of them. There's a very heavy pro-Israel lobby in this country of Jewish citizens that live in the United States that believe that Israel should have their own country because it's the only way they can stay safe. They've been persecuted throughout history. So I certainly don't blame them for that. But for Saddam to have this tape, now this is speculation on my point, but I do know that they were trying real hard. And I just didn't know what part Casey had in it willingly, if he was just a cluster cluck,
mm-hmm.
or if he was part of it, if there was some purpose to it. Maybe it was a way of getting himself out of the country. I don't know. But I do know what did happen. Before I found out about Saddam, I just thought Casey was just a screw up. Lost it, panicked. He was so scared he just totally lost it. And I don't see him as some Machiavellian character either, where he was back into the dark prince, he was back plotting. But I think he did have a plan. He didn't care about what happened. I'm convinced he didn't care about what happened to me. And as evidence, I had 3 matches with him. And Iraq was his claim to fame. I mean, yeah, he was, when he was working with Gagne's, the Sheik, whatever it was, he had a nice role. But think about this. If you're in a country where, like Iraq, where you're bigger than, you're bigger, like I say, Elvis Presley and the Beatles and all that, that was your claim to fame in your life. You were a national hero in your own home country. why wouldn't you want to get together with someone who'd been there and went through that with you and get together and talk about old times and all that?
Right.
All the years that after he came back to this country, he even came to Florida and worked. I worked with him. I worked the program with him in Fort Lauderdale. There was no friendship there. I mean, I didn't know. I'd forgotten. I've been shoving it down my subconscious by that time for a few years. So, but it was never, hey, let's get together and talk over old times. He had a witness there to his greatness, but he also had a witness to his losing it in the ring. It's hard for me to believe he would need to get a couple of Oscars. One for the time when he dropped the blade, the way he acted, and the other one was when he knocked me out in the second match.
Let's get back there, Bob. He knocks you out. You get back up, kinda slowly, and all this chaos is going on. You talked about the security, and do you just take your chance and figure out who you think you need to trust in this instance, or what? How the hell did you get out of there? I guess
a lot of the people left. A lot of the fans left. All you need is 100 or maybe 50.
Well,
you
sure,
don't need
sure. Well, no,
25.
sure, right.
But there was. Let's put it this way: the ring was in the middle of the field, and between the middle of the field and my dressing room, that area was completely still packed with fans, because the Army guys would try to open an aisle. They had batons. They were using them. They didn't have their pistols out. I guess they should have, but they had batons, and what they would do is they would make an aisle, and they would do smacking people, but they would make an aisle, and the aisle would open up, and then I would try to go down it, and before I got halfway or even a third of the way down it, it would start to close up behind me, and then up ahead they would press in, wait and see me come up the aisle, and the aisle would narrow to the point that now what I was seeing on both sides, I saw people with knives in their hands. I saw a couple guys with swords. I saw people with sharp sticks of bamboo, people with clubs, guns. I mean, if you're going to shoot me, just, but I didn't want to get close enough for somebody to stab me. So I didn't want to go through an aisle that was only wide enough for me to because all they had to do, you wouldn't even have to take the knife out of your pocket. Just open it up and stick it through the cloth. And as I brush by, just slice me as I go by. So I needed the aisle to be at least 5 feet wide before I was going to feel secure and going up there.
Right.
Well, by the time I got halfway back, it would close up at the far end. I was going to have to fight my way through. And the military guys were not being like vicious, nasty like the security guys were. They weren't turning around and beating people and just forcing an aisle open. They were backing up themselves. The crowd was forcing them back. So I'd have to retreat to the ring. And about the third time I got back in the ring, that's when I noticed the camera was still on. And about that time, some of the military guys were trying to get in the ring with me to hide, to feel safe. I ran the guy with the camera off, and I made a little speech before I did because I figured somebody was watching it or was taping to be watched later. And I made a little speech and ran the guy off. I threatened to shoot him with a pistol I had if he didn't get out of there because I figured as long as he was filming. And it was true because within 5 minutes, the guys came to get me. He was taping, and my conjecture here, I know I sound like Ray, you've been talking to me for 4 or 5 months now. I think you know I'm not a nut job, but I might be sounding like one now. It just sounds fantastical. I told you about leaving the torture chamber because I knew they were beating up people for my benefit because I was watching. If I wasn't there, maybe the chances are very good that people weren't going to be being tortured like that. So I got out of there. Well, by the same token, I felt like as long as that camera was on me, there would be no hurry to get me out of there. So I ran the guy off with the camera off. I just threatened him. I said, well, I hope that camera runs by itself because you're not going to be able to run it if you don't get out of here. Once that happened, about 5 minutes later, security guys came down and got me. They had the gun, they had the AKs, they had the bayonets. All the fans were facing the ring. They just came from behind them, from the underneath the stadium on my side where I was trying to get out through that tunnel. They came out of there, and just started whacking people and opened up the aisle within, they were down to the ring in, 30 seconds. But the guy in charge, he was really disgusted that I was still there. I could tell it. He was very disappointed. What they apparently had planned wasn't for me to still be there. I got out of there. I went back to the dressing room, and I sat down. I looked out. I could see that the road to Baghdad, you could see it from where the dressing room was up high enough. I could see over the opening on the other side of the stadium. I was on the far side from the entrance road, but there was an open space, like the big open area where people come in through the front gate. I could see most of the road back to Baghdad from my dressing room. And I looked, and the road was completely full. I mean, it was packed from one end to the other, because I'd been in the ring for an hour. So that had given the first people that left, the fans that left the stadium that were walking back to Baghdad, they had time to make it back there. So the road was full from one end to the other. All 3 miles was full of people. So I sat down. This colonel in this security thing says, well, come on, get up, we're going now. I said, no, we're not going now. I said, you got to wait. He said, no, we're going now. And I said, well, how are we going? And he said, we're going to drive you out of here. I went over to the door I had looked out, and I asked him to come over. I said, you see all those people out there? I said, we got to wait till they're all gone. I said, I don't care if it's midnight. If we try to go through those people, I'm telling you, it's not safe for me. He said, well, don't you worry about it. We'll take care of you. The colonel who was in charge of the security guys, the way they got me into the van to drive back, even down that road, was that I had the commanding colonel or general or whatever he was of the army that had in charge of the battalion guys, and I had this colonel of the secret security soldiers. Both of them, I was sitting in the front seat of a 3/4 ton truck. If you remember the trucks from the show MASH,
sure,
or with the Red Cross on the side,
right?
I had one of those trucks. Now it's got an area in the back that'll seat 12 people. So when I went to get in the truck, I went to get in the back. Of course, if we're driving through the people, we don't want them to see me. But they insisted I get in the front, and insisted at gunpoint, bayonet point. So I'm sitting in the front, and we drive out the gate, and we got, maybe 50 yards. It took about 5 minutes. We got about 50 yards down the road. The colonel, security guy, bailed out. We had a big bunch of people behind us. What he did, he had six of his troops that he put in the back of the van. I wonder why he put them in the back of this truck, because what good are they going to do back there? But because he was sitting on my right and this military guy was driving, this army guy was driving the truck, I thought, well, if it's dangerous, why would these guys be here? So reluctantly, gulp, scared to death, suspicious as I could be. I was terrified, believe me. I had to go along with it. I tried to get away a couple times and ran into bayonets. So what happened was, we're about 50 yards down from the stadium, and a big object, I just happened to be looking at it, an object comes flying from the crowd is parted on both sides, and a bunch of them are all actually off the highway now. They're back standing on the dirt because they had to step off to make room for the people who were backing up. But over the top of all of them came this big projectile. It bounced off the hood and went over the top, or went and hit the top of the truck. What it was the paving stones on that, they call them cobblestones or paving stones,
right?
Were like the shape of a brick. They were somewhat sculpted, but they weren't smooth. They were irregular surface. And they were about 2 feet long and about a foot wide and about 8 or 9, 10 inches deep. The thing I never lifted one, but they had to weigh 100 pounds. So I figured, how they could be launching, whoever launched that stone, I had to be 2 or 3 guys. And I saw that, and I told the colonel or the guy driving the truck, I said, hey, go off the road. I said, don't go down the road, go off road, go across the open spaces out there, so we can get around these people immediately. Well, while we were jawing about that, Another stone came and hit it bounced, but it was closer to the window. It actually hit the front window on the driver's side, and the window fragmented, and pieces of glass, like a shotgun blast, hit this Army guy in the face.
The driver?
And, the driver.
Okay.
And he started screaming, and he took his foot off the gas, or off the clutch, and the truck jerked forward and knocked down a bunch of people. It was pressed against people who hadn't been able to get out of the way yet, and it knocked a bunch of them down, injured them. And during that match, about, I don't know, several hundred people got hurt seriously enough that they couldn't walk, and had been carried out and laid in that near that open area I talked about, where you come in. So when everybody left the stadium that day, when they walked out, that 90% of the people went out that way because they were going back to Baghdad. What happened is they walked by on their way out of the stadium. They see 300-400 of their fellow citizens are laid out there, bleeding, some of them dead, screwed up, moaning, crying, weeping, screaming, blood, tears, everything, horrible. It looked like a slaughterhouse. And that was the last thing these people saw before they left the stadium. So now we're going to go and drive through all those people. Well, guess who they blame for all their hurt fellow citizens being there? They blame me. It was my fault. So we go through this. We get about 50 yards down the road. Here come the cobblestones, and when the truck stalled, the security colonel turned around, rapped on the little window between the front and the back, and issued a command. And the 6 guys in the back got out, and they formed a space. They started firing their AK-47s in the air. They made a space around the truck. The colonel told me, "Stay here." He says, "I'm going to go out and check out where those stones are coming from. Stay here. I'll be back." But see, the stones were coming from in front of us. And when he got out of the passenger side, 2 of the soldiers had come up and cleared a space from him, again, by playing around with their bayonets and firing into the air to where there was an open space. Well, when he got out, he didn't walk forward to see what the problem was, where it was coming from. He walked back, and I could see through the window to the back. And what happened is that they formed up. He got those 6 guys around him, and at the same time, he had another bunch of the same guys. They came out from the stadium and beat and stabbed their way through the crowd to rescue the colonel and get him out of there, make sure he didn't get hurt. He just left me out there. The Army commander, he was lucky. He was able to close his eyes, and the glass didn't go directly into his eyeballs, but he panicked, and he tried to take off. He'd been the one responsible for all those people laying out there, and he didn't make it either. So I had to get out of there on my own. And the benefit I had was that I knew I'd been in the military, I'd been a medic, and I also had learned how to be a truck driver. I knew how to drive military trucks, 2.5 ton, to 3/4 ton, and Army Jeeps were the main vehicles in the service, but for the Army anyway. But I knew how to drive the truck. So I took off. I was so glad it started, because it had stalled immediately when I tried to start it, because when he let the engine die, he kind of choked it up a little bit. But it started. I managed to get, without having to run over anybody, I managed to get off onto the packed earth. I got away from the crowd, and I managed to get out of there. I didn't go back to my hotel. I didn't go back to where they could find me. I had set up in that days before the match. I'd been setting up a place where I might find refuge. And I went to try to find refuge there, and I did. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here.
Hey guys, you're invited to join us April 20th, Orlando, Florida at the fabulous Rosen Center Hotel for Barry Rose and Captain Nick Massey's Glory Days GrappleCon. Tickets available right now at eventbrite.com. It's a full day of events, meet and greet with dozens of your favorite wrestling superstars, both past and present, It all kicks off 10:30 in the morning. Ron Simmons, a special 1-hour Q&A session. Damn! Then from there, meet and greet all of the great superstars in attendance. Get your pictures, get your autographs, and spend some time. Have some conversations. Make a memory. Before we head off to the Legends of World Class reunion panel, hosted by former announcer Mark Lawrence. Just some of the names on the panel include Brian Adias, Al Perez, the one-man gang Missy Hyatt, and Jack Victory. They're going to go back in time and discuss their time in the world-class territory. Then from there, late in the evening, it's a shot of Jack with Jack Victory. So come on in, stop by, have a good time, have some drinks, and most assuredly, have quite a few laughs as well. Again, mark your calendars, April 20th, Orlando, Florida, the Rosen Center Hotel. It's the Glory Days Grapple Con. Get your tickets today over at eventbrite.com.
The reason I couldn't even write about it till 2022 was that I got help from, I think, the United States government. We didn't have an embassy there, but we had an intersection at the Belgian embassy, and I had found a way to find out where it was, and I went there and I tried to get. They took me in. Saddam was looking for me. They had that embassy almost surrounded, but I found a place in the back, and I got in there, and they helped me get out of the country. But there was American people.
Let's see. So all those people left the truck. You were in the truck and you were driving, and you found refuge.
Although we didn't have an embassy there, just what I told you, we had an intersection. The Belgian embassy, I was able to get there, and they got me out of the country. All right, Ray, I think, taking a long way down this trail.
Holy cow. How many days were you there again, Bob?
15 days.
Wow. That's the longest 15 days of anybody's life. My God.
Man. Yeah. Well, I think, after 2 sessions of it, I think I can wrap it up pretty quickly next week. I don't want to leave anybody hanging, but most of the adventures it's already happened. So how I managed to get out of there is anticlimactic. Anyway, we'll do that next week. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good. We can touch on that at the top of the show, and you can explain to everybody, the last little bit here. Obviously, the meat was certainly here this week. We talked in detail about both of the matches, and wow, everything that transpired after the second one's just insane. Talk about luck. I can see why you talk about, PTSD and whatnot. My God, I can only imagine, what was going through your head through all this entire situation. But man, we certainly appreciate you sharing your life with us and these stories and this crazy time, in Iraq, of all places. What a crazy place to have been to go wrestle, and then this situation. Wow, everything in between, man. We appreciate you sharing, such a important part of your life with us.
Well, thanks, Ray. I never ever before I didn't know about podcasts until. Just a few years ago, not long ago. I never ever thought I'd be telling this story for wide circulation.
Right.
And again, for 25 years, I shut everything. I put everything in a box and sent it as far away from me as I could. I used to dream about this stuff, and I had trouble sleeping, so I tried to put it on my conscious mind, and so I wouldn't be having it show up when I was asleep. So. It helps to get it out of my system. I want to thank everybody out there for bearing with me for the long story. Hope not boring, but long, certainly.
There's plenty enough action involved. That's for certain. Man, yeah, we'll talk about the tail end there. Now that you've sought refuge, perhaps found some refuge. Obviously, you made your way back, and I got a couple of quick questions for you on that at the top of the next show. But we'll also be touching on some other things. Maybe we'll do a couple of listener questions or something like that and work our way through another episode next week.
All right. Well, sounds good. Well, thanks for tonight, Ray.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you again sharing your life with us, Bob. We'll talk to you again soon.
All right. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you, Bob, again so very much for all the great stories here. And a reminder that you guys can friend Bob over at facebook.com/poor Bob Roop. And of course, be sure to check out that $5 all-access tier over at patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. So many gifts, guys, for just $5, and every penny of it going right back here into the podcast network. So please show your support. Help keep all of the great shows here, like this one, up and running. We greatly appreciate each and every one of the listeners. And we'll be back soon with another edition of the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop.